Hi, I'm Xavier Hanson from Reveal Group, and today I'll be taking you through some steps to avoid RPA disaster. Before I start, a quick background on Reveal Group. We have been in RPA for over 6 years now. Obviously, you can tell from the accent, based in Australia originally, but have moved globally in the past 3 years. And primarily, we've worked to help our clients and customers scale their RPA programs. So hopefully today, what I can take you through is what we've learned over the last 6 years, and you can take some of that away to help with your RPA programs as well. So today we'll be taking you through a few key items. One is obviously the RPA challenges that we see out in various organisations. Some may resonate with you. I hope not too many resonate with you. But what we see is these challenges really halting a lot of the scale that is possible with RPA, and therefore a lot of the benefits that come with it. Then I'll go through some of the keys to RPA success. So how we've sort of structured the thinking and what you can apply to help your RPA program succeed. And then finally, we are at a Shibumi conference, so software to the rescue, how we've codified all of the knowledge that I'm going to present here and that we've learned over the last 6 years that you can take advantage of with our product Robo Manager that's built on the Shibumi platform. So firstly, let's talk about what's going wrong. A Deloitte study in 2018 showed that year over year, RPA revenue is growing 63%. So that's up to 846 million last year. Approximately half of the RPA programs in respondents had either stagnated or failed in the first 12 months. And only 3% of the organisations who responded said that their RPA programs have managed to scale. So what's going wrong? Well, we typically see some key areas where things really do go wrong. First one is resourcing. So finding experienced resources is really difficult. The market for RPA resources is a very hot one. And even the people that you do find may not have the necessary credentials to ensure RPA success. Automating the wrong processes. So often we see processes that maybe either they run once a year for 10 minutes that are automated, or completely the other way, they're extremely complex and require a lot of subjective judgment, are attempted to be automated with RPA. And when they fail because they were bad processes in the first place, then inevitably the RPA program begins to suffer. Poor quality automations. This is a big one, and one that's usually quite immediately apparent. The processes that are being developed by developers, either the developers are underskilled or there are a lack of checks and balances to make sure that what goes into production is high quality. And that leads to, again, unstable processes that don't do what they should, resulting in, again, an RPA program that is going to struggle and not get the benefits that you want. High cost of maintenance. This is an interesting one because the whole idea of RPA is to reduce cost of operations. You see high cost of maintenance typically with combination with the poor quality item. Anything that goes into production, if it is of poor quality, means it's going to require more money to maintain. I saw at one of our clients that we were going in to help with, they had a dev team of about 10 people and an operations or management team of 30 people. So there was way more people in the operations just trying to keep the automations working, which to me and probably to you is a huge trigger that there was a quality issue upstream. So getting that right means that your cost of maintenance is low and you actually do get the benefits that RPA promises. And finally, for now, infrastructure. This one I'll go into a bit more deeply later, but getting infrastructure right is probably the thing that is going to potentially stop your RPA program outright. If you're not working on the right platform, the right IT architecture, then your robots aren't going to work, they might be insecure, and the whole program's going to stop. So making sure that we get that right is so important to the RPA program. So combinations of all of those at the above is typically what stops organizations from scaling their RPA program. Maybe that they can't find enough resources to fill seats, that they can't find the right automations right opportunities to automate, or their infrastructure is sagging under the weight of a mature program. All of these things put a handbrake on scale. So how do we address these? With the Blueprint for Scale, Reveal Group's framework for building a scaled, sustainable RPA program that is the right size for your organization. And there are 5 key elements to the Blueprint for Scale. First, we have enable. So enable is all about building an operating model that enables your organization to embrace intelligent automation. And there are several things within that I'll get into, but it's the overarching umbrella of why we're doing automation, what we want to achieve with automation, and how we go about that and measure that. Next, we have discover. Discover is about going out and finding opportunities to automate, making sure those opportunities are good candidates, and then prioritizing those opportunities to deliver the most benefit to the business. Next, we have deliver. Deliver is about actually executing on delivering those processes. So we've got them from the pipeline. They are good candidates. Let's go about building them to high quality and make sure that everything follows the same steps and standards all along the way, that we review what's complete at the end before we push it in production. Next, we have operate, and this is about that ongoing maintenance and operations. So support model lives in there and that sort of thing, making sure that the digital workers are as seamless and just another part of the organization. And then finally, platform, making sure that we've designed and built a platform that can scale with your program and is reliable all the way along. And all of that comes together to create the blueprint for scale. So to talk about how these 5 capabilities can help us, let's go back a little bit and talk a bit more deeply about what they're actually addressing. And first, I'd love to talk about the importance of governance. So governance is a word that is used for many things. In this context, we're talking more about the guiding principles and overarching framework of the RPA program. Why we're doing it. Commonly, what we find is that organizations jump in RPA as this very cool, new, shiny tool. There's automation, there's robotics in the title. It has to be great. Let's get this thing in. And then they run around with a hammer looking for a nail to hit, which is not very strategic and certainly not the way to go about building a sustainable program. We often also see in this space issues of finding where the RPA program sits within an organization, finding the right people. I said earlier, finding experienced people is important, but how do we train people when they come on? So often I've seen clients bring in new people who have RPA in their LinkedIn profile, and then they just expected to figure out how the program works when they land. And then lastly, and I think this is a very important one as well that's often overlooked, but communications. I've seen a lot of programs put on hold because the early communications about what they were trying to achieve with an RPA program, what it actually meant for everybody's jobs in the organization, weren't done well. And so you end up with a lot of pushback from the various business units who really can benefit from a lot of this work. And so to address all of these items, we have the enable. We reach into the blueprint for scale and we pull out enable. And enable, what that helps us do is it helps us define our vision for the program. And vision can be a bit of a soft word, but what we're looking for is aligning to corporate strategy, making sure what we're doing with the RPA program aligns to what the whole organization is trying to do and trying to achieve the same goals. Speaking of goals, setting goals for the RPA program. Are we trying to process twice as much volume with the same workforce? Are we trying to release our resources so they can go into more value-add work and more customer-facing work? What are the goals of the program? Let's set them and let's communicate them out. People. How do we onboard people? What roles need to be filled? What responsibilities do those people have? Where do we sit in the organization? How do we train new people as they come on? Very important to have structured. Again, as you scale, you want to be able to add people seamlessly, and they should be able to know as they come on what roles and responsibilities they have and where they fit into the organization. Change management. So this again is one that is constantly overlooked in customers who are having trouble. Integrating the whole RPA program into the change management. It is a transformation program no matter which way you slice it. So making sure that the existing change management protocols that are in place in the organization, the RPA program fits and aligns with those so that any change that comes about as a result of automation is just another piece and is embedded into the organization. And lastly for this piece, comms. I mentioned it before, but communications around all of these elements, what we're trying to do, what this means for you, executive support for the RPA program is so crucial. And so Enable has frameworks for all of these pieces so that you can help scale your program. Crucially as well, and I'll talk about this for each individual capability for Blueprint for Scale, but All of these should be supported by tools. Having things in Excel and PowerPoint is great when you're first starting out, but the end game should be trying to get this into a software management tool that can help create efficiency and, again, drive down cost. So something like the Enable, what we're looking for is a lifecycle management tool so that we can measure program success and track all of these individual items as we go through. So it's great. We have a framework that runs our entire program from a high level. We know who's doing what where, and we know what we're trying to achieve. The next question is, how do we get those processes to achieve that goal? Where do we find them? How do we find them? How do we assess them? And so let's talk automation pipeline. Having a robust pipeline is really key to the long-term health of the program. If you don't have a pipeline of verified opportunities that are justifying the business case for the program and it's all dried up, then things come to a halt quite quickly. Your delivery teams, the development teams sort of stop working, and the executive support is going to dry up quite quickly. And what we see commonly is a lot of clients and customers, they'll start out really quickly out of the gate. A lot of interest in RPA, a lot of opportunities coming through. And/or they'll have a low-hanging fruit. So they'll go and find the smaller processes that are out there that are ready to go for automation. The truth is that those automation opportunities and the enthusiasm can dry up quickly, and so you can be left quite quickly with a pipeline that has not much left in it. And so there is a way to address that, which is going to be discussed in the next piece. And the other piece is the difficulty in managing the pipeline. So even if you do have a large pipeline with all the different automation opportunities in there, how do we manage those, view those, make sure that they're all being assessed evenly, and prioritize those? So often I've walked into a customer and that customer has great automation candidates. They have 400 of them. But there's no way of telling which ones are going to provide the best benefit, how long they're going to take to deliver. And if they do, how do we prioritize those and schedule them out? So this is what we need to address with the Discover capability of the Blueprint for Scale. So what Discover is really focused on is everything I just talked about, which is intake. So where do we source the processes from? Is it crowdsourcing? Do we have town halls where we explain to large groups of the business units what RPA is, what it can do, what are good processes, and have them, crowdsource and give us processes? Or do we take a more methodical approach where we go business unit by business unit and look at every process in the entire organization and triage out which ones might be ready for RPA now, which ones might be ready for RPA in the future, and any additional technologies we might want? Once we do have those opportunities, we need to assess them. We need to make sure that the same rules are being applied to every single assessment so that we can do an apples for apples comparison between processes and make sure that that process is standardized so that if we need to scale our pipeline, all we need to do is give the right tools to a new team. That team can go out and apply the same process over and over again, and we have a consistent pipeline with assessed processes. Once we have that assessment and our ability to compare, how do we prioritize those processes? So we typically want to go for the ones with the highest benefit that are easiest to produce. How do we manage that? And then lastly, scheduling those processes for delivery. So under the Blueprint for Scale, we have templates, tools, methodologies that support all of these items so that very easily you can build a pipeline of opportunities. You can look at those pipeline of opportunities and assess which ones are going to provide the biggest benefit, and you're going to then schedule those for your delivery teams to schedule, which means you can project what your benefits are going to be. And again, when we talk about tools, to support this, we need an opportunity assessment tool, a pipeline management tool, and something that allows delivery scheduling. Now that we've got our pipeline filled, we've got our overarching program that tells us our vision, we've got our pipeline, which is all these processes ready to go for development, that is going to help us meet the goal for the vision for the program. How do we actually deliver them? Well, we talk about development. And this is one of those places that I guess is probably the most common pain point, is development quality and speed. So from what we've seen, organizations don't often have a repeatable delivery methodology. And if it does exist, then often it's not actually optimized for RPA. It's typically beholden to traditional software development life cycles, which are extended and have more testing and stage gates than you would typically see or require for an RPA. We're not changing underlying applications. It's sitting on top and is really just work instructions we're testing. So making sure that a repeatable delivery methodology that is appropriate for RPA is in place is important and often not seen. Also in the early days of RPA, and this is going back a while now, but there weren't a lot of industry best practices. There was no development community, there was no community of developers who could discuss, what best practice might be or solutions to problems. It was a bit of a wild west where everyone was just sort of figuring out what they need to do. And in typically what we've seen in organizations is you'll have some experts from the early days or who started out the RPA program who've learned some lessons and built some best practices or standards based on that. And that becomes the coding standard, which is good. It's good that there are some standards, but typically they don't change and evolve over time. And even in the first place, they might not have been the best way to approach it. They were just that particular person's version of it. So the culmination really of all of this is that processes can be automated and they work technically, but they are not standardized. They're probably unstable. The biggest difference, or the quote I always use is there's a difference between making a process that works and a process that works in production at scale without falling over. And that difference comes in whether or not you have consistent development standards and quality review. Let's talk about the deliver service line that helps us nail down all of that and make sure that whatever's going into production is high quality. Firstly, there's the methodology, and that's talking about how we go through the delivery process. What steps do we take? What documents are filled out? What templates do we need to have? What stage gates do we need to cross? And I think the stage gating is really important as well because it gives the opportunity for peer review or external review to prevent any poor code getting into production. So methodology is important and Deliver helps us with that. It also helps us develop our coding standards. And these can be drawn from sort of industry best practice and experience of your service implementers, and then distilled down and customized for local requirements, for your organization's requirements. Testing, really important to get testing right. This Deliver helps us with testing by defining an RPA specific testing approach that again is repeatable, but also has allowances for different situations. Testing is one of the things with RPA that can be unique because typically you've got applications spread all over the organization. Some have test environments, some don't, and RPA is stitching all of those together. So having different testing situations or scenarios is really important as part of the testing process. And obviously review, making sure that everything that comes through is reviewed and has stage gates. And all of this is supported by good project management tools and, if available, automated code review tools to make sure that the process is as efficient as possible and everybody's following the same steps. Next, we're going to talk about maintenance. So I said before that I gathered a team of 30 people in the operations side and 10 developers because the processes going in were so poor. That's one sort of, I guess, challenge that we see quite often, the cost of maintenance there. What we also see is that in the newer programs, cost of maintenance is overlooked. So, you're setting up your program, you're excited about the development, and you worry about what goes into production later. And then what happens as the program matures is it becomes a headache and money's thrown at maintenance to make things better. It's this reactionary model with missing feedback loops that don't go back to development, so that the development teams don't know that they need to improve. There's no tie back and reporting from the production side of things back to the business case to make sure that the benefits are actually coming through. And so to address all of this, we turn to Blueprint for Scale. Yet again, that might not surprise you. We'll go to the Operate capability this time. And so Operate is really about making sure that these processes run as business as usual with minimal overhead, and you have a digital workforce that's just integrated into your existing business operations. So we're talking about support model with triage. So if there's anything that goes wrong with the automations, who's responsible for fixing them, L1, L2, L3 support. We talk about the maintenance. So what do change requests look like in response to an application changing or a process change? We talk about enhancements. So enhancements are a different kind of change request where, based on the reporting and what we're seeing, how can we get more efficiency out of the automated process and potentially get more benefit? And of course, reporting and dashboarding. Extremely important, because if you go back to the vision of our program, where we have our goals, benefits, whatever they may be, we need to be able to look into production and say, okay, everything that we set out to do, are we actually doing it? And reporting and dashboarding is key to that. And it's no surprise that to support the operate capability, we need dashboards and performance reporting tools. Now, I think we've got everything going, right? We've got the enable, so we have our full sort of overarching framework in place. We have our discover, so we've got our pipeline built. Our deliver, we're producing really high quality automations, and operate. Processes are working fine in production. What's left? Well, the technical infrastructure, I would say, I said it before and I'll say it again, I think the technical infrastructure is probably the most important piece. The reason that it's so important is because it is the most likely to stop a program in its tracks. I saw once a program that had all of their business critical applications running on laptops in a locked room. So if that room had a fire, all those laptops go, all those processes go, you've effectively lost your entire RPA program overnight. Could you imagine if you had an offshoring center with 30 people working in it, all of the knowledge they have and the capacity that they're producing, those processes, if they were cut off overnight, what would happen? So thinking about infrastructure in that regard helps highlight its importance. The other thing we see commonly is not just I guess that infrastructure doesn't have enough focus, but also that it hasn't been built in a way that it can scale adequately. So as you're adding new developers or new processes to production, there are strains put on different parts of the infrastructure, and it has to be designed to quickly scale in those areas to be able to handle that. And so lastly, last piece of the blueprint for scale we reach for is the platform capability. Here we're talking about a scalable platform that is stable, which means that it is stable, which means it's designed for RPA. It's got all the right components in the right places with the right specifications and support and monitoring, but it's reliable. So making sure that there's disaster recovery and high availability. Those are terms thrown around often, but what it really means is that if the service center where our platform is running, if it gets hit by lightning and everything goes down, what happens? Is there a failover to a different server? All of that sort of stuff. If you've got business critical processes running on those, at scale, running in that server farm, then you need to have disaster recovery somewhere and failover. And lastly, secure. This is another thing. Because of the way the automations operate, they act like people typically, and they have human user credentials. If the platform isn't secure, then it can present a really big risk. And so making sure that it's designed for security is another part of the platform capability. Now, design is such an important part of platform, but also once we have everything set up and built, there's the monitoring, making sure that we have a good inventory system and application monitoring. And so all of those sit into different tools for monitoring and those sorts of things. Okay, so that's a blueprint for scale. And I know what you think. You're thinking, Xavier, you poor naive Australian man, that's going to cost a fortune. I've got to get a service implementer in or a strategic firm to come in and help me design all of these things and tailor them to my organization. It's going to cost a fortune. It's going to cost more than I can save with RPA. Well, that's understandable, I guess. You've also got to worry about embedding it and making sure that all of these different items or capabilities that are introduced are actually executed and used. And then typically when you're implementing something like this, what you would have to do is have a series of tools to manage all the different aspects we're talking about. I mean, when we walk into programs that have a good operating framework, typically you'll find that there's Excel for majority of the things we talked about, like pipeline and even project management in some cases. There might be a project management tool in place. It might be MS Project, at best Jira. And then when it comes to reporting, it's typically done manually with a combination of any RPA databases or maybe Tableau's in there or something like that. And so there's all these sort of disparate sources of information all around, which makes getting a single view of your organization really difficult. So you've got disparate tools and I guess the cost and understanding that goes into building the blueprint for scale. So what do? Well, guess what? We have a piece of software called Reveal Robo Manager, and it is built on Shibumi. So RoboManager is an end-to-end intelligent automation lifecycle platform that incorporates everything we just spoke about with a blueprint for scale. It's a lifecycle management tool. It's an opportunity assessment tool. It does pipeline management. It does prioritization, delivery management, project management for that delivery. It does production dashboarding, has platform inventory, and does benefit tracking all in one. So you've got your single source of truth for your entire RPA program in one place. And that allows you to make empirical, data-driven decisions about what you want to do with your RPA program. And what it really is a codification and distillation of 6 years of experience from Reveal, automating and building scaled RPA programs that you can take advantage of by working with RoboManager. Now, RoboManager fits into, or it is the warehouse that houses the concept of what we call the RPA factory. So within the RPA factory, you've got all these different pieces that we just spoke about: production support, pipeline, development, and all that sort of thing. Everything is housed within RoboManager. And you'll see two other tools that sit within there. One is automated code review, and one is automated development that we've built in there to try to shorten that deliver piece. But largely everything we've talked about, the RPA factory, is the blueprint for scale come to life. And that's it. Thank you for your time. To find out more, go to revealgroup.com/robosuite. You can also look up the hashtag #AutomateBetter on LinkedIn and other social, or reach out to your Shibumi representative who'll get us in touch. Thank you very much for your time.